In this video, we're going to create a form-subform relationship in LibreOffice base. So what we've got here is a simple LibreOffice database. It's just got a single table called Table Video Posts, and what this table does is basically it just lists 33 videos that I've uploaded over the past 4 or 5 years. You can see that they're tagged by year. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a form with two controls. The first control is going to have the years listed, so one record for each year. The other control is going to have a list of the videos. So you will click on the year in one control, and the other control will show you the videos that were uploaded in that year. So the table is already created. If you don't know how to create a table in LibreOffice base, I've got another video, should be appearing up here, that will show you how to do that. Just click on the I icon, I guess, or the letter I icon. Now, before we create a form, we first of all need to go to the Forms section, and we'll create the form in Design View. So let's double click on that. Now, when you're creating a form, you need to first of all make sure that your environment is set up correctly. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to View, Toolbars, and these are the toolbars you want to see: Form Controls, Form Design, and perhaps the standard toolbar that contains Save and some other elements here. So, but these two are the most important. And to be quite honest, I'd advise you not to have any other toolbars open, because as you can see, from this particular form, if I just make it a bit smaller, it's busy enough. Any more toolbars on it will just crowd it. So this is your form controls toolbar, and on the bottom you have your form design toolbar, and here you have your standard toolbar. Now, creating forms in the LibreOffice form environment is a little bit non-intuitive, because especially if you've come from Microsoft Access, because in Microsoft Access what you see here is basically a form. Not so in LibreOffice. The best way to think of this is that this is a form canvas. Now, you can treat it as a form, but what LibreOffice calls a form, you're better off thinking as a data control. Think of it as being a data control, for example. So the first data control is going to contain the years. So let's first of all then create a query to get back the years. So for example, if we look at tables, we've got years which, well, there's more than one year, but we want a unique year for each of these. So let's do that right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Queries, and I'm going to create a query. I'm just going to create a query in SQL view. Okay, so here's our query and here's our table. So I'm going to type select distinct. Now, here's the thing with LibreOffice table names. With queries and with LibreOffice or LibreOffice base, it tends to capitalize. If you just type the name of your object, be it a field, i.e. column, or a table, it tends to capitalize the names regardless of whether they're capitalized in reality or not. So for example, I want to select distinct year. Now you'll notice on the actual table it's capital Y and then lowercase EAR. So what I got to do is I've got to put quotes around year so that the database knows that this is the actual capitalization that the database requires. So select distinct year from, and the table is, again, because my table isn't all in capital letters, it's table video posts. So select distinct year from table video posts. That's our query. So if I just run it to test it, you can see we have a unique year element called year from table video posts. So I'm just going to save this as query years. And if we go to queries, you can see you've got query years, and if we double click on it, there's our query for query years. So as I said before, our form design toolbar is on the bottom. The first element we're going to need is the form navigator. Now, I've made mistakes around this before because it's the form navigator that's on the design toolbar, there's also a navigator someplace else which is not the same thing, and it's easy to make a mistake around that. So make sure you get the form navigator. So now the first thing you want to do is you see if I right click on forms, we get new and it says form. Now this can be confusing. I would, if I were you, think of this as a data control, not as a form, because what you're creating here is going to go onto the form canvas that's here. So I'm going to do new form. I'm going to double click on it, and you know what, to keep things simple, I'm going to call it DS years, as in data source years. So calling it a form is a misnomer. I'm just going to call it a data source. Then I'm going to right click on that and I'm going to choose properties. And so what is this data source going to be bound to? So when you get your properties window, when you've clicked on your form or your data source, in this instance, you'll get a general, a data and an events tab. So first of all, that's its name, DS years. The data, so under the data tab, you've got various elements. So for content type, I'm going to choose query, and which particular query do we want? It's going to be query years. Okay, I'm going to leave it with its defaults right now, and I'm not going to close it actually, I'm just going to leave it here. So we got a data source years. Now I'm also going to create another data source, and I'm going to call this DS video data. Notice here in the form properties window, if I click on DS years, I get DS years here, DS video data, DS video data. Now I'm going to click on the data source, the data tab for the data source, DS years. So I'm going to go to table, but this time I'm going to go with the full table that's in the database, table video posts. So now let's put the years on the form first of all. So very important is that you click on the data source years, because when you choose a control on the form, it's going to be linked to whichever of the forms you've created in the form navigator. So first of all, click on the data source within the form navigator, then add a control. Now for me, I'm going to add a table control. So I click on the table control and I just draw it on the form like so. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the data control. I'm going to go to anchor and I'm going to anchor it to the page. That gives me a bit more control over where I place the control, no pun intended. So I'm using my keyboard to arrow left and right, and I mean under the properties you can type in the width, the height, the position X, the position Y, because you'll notice as I move the control around, the positions on the properties form are changing as well. So for now I'm just going to leave the data control there. So now with the data control in position, it's time to click a column. Noting that the form is still in design mode, I'm going to right click on the header of the table and I'm going to choose insert column. Now in this instance I'm going to put in a numeric field. I could also put in a text box, but I get to show you some more stuff with the numeric field, given that we're putting in years which are numeric. So I'm going to choose numeric field, and then I'm going to click on it, and then when I go over to the properties tab, there's an area where it gets a name, and I'm just going to call it N years, for numeric years, and the label I'm going to give it is going to be years. And then I'm going to, what I'm furthermore going to do, in fact I'm not going to do it yet, I'm going to show you, because what we're going to need to do is set the decimal accuracy to 0. It's at 2 right now, which means 2016 will come through as 2016.00, but let's just get it wrong first. So if I click on data, and given that we use query years, there's only one column in query years, and that's year. So let's just see if it works now when I put it into presentation view, I guess. So if I click on the design mode to switch design mode off, and yes, we've got the years, but it's 2015.00, 2016.00. So put it back into design view again, and I'm going to click on years, go over to the properties tab, which you get by doing right click and well, it's not doing it now because I've got the properties up. But if I go to the properties tab, click on years, go to the properties tab, so it's dealing with that, and go down to decimal accuracy, 0 decimal places, and we don't want 1000 separator, not that we'd get one with 2015, 2016, but it just shows you what you can have. So now if I go back into the actual view, you've got years and you've got your form navigator here. So we've got the first element of the form created, and that's putting years on it. So we're going to have a one-to-many relationship on this particular form. So that's the first bit done. So we go back to design view now. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to put on the grid for the table which contains all of the videos. So in this instance, what we're going to do is we're going to use the wizard this time, mainly because there's a lot more columns that we want to bring in. So first of all, make sure you've got the correct data source or form selected. So in this instance, I'm going to call it DS video data, and I'm going to select that because that's what the control will be bound to. Then I'm going to press the form control wizard, which now has gone to blue, so we know it's selected. Then I'm going to press the table control and I'm going to draw it on the form. And the wizard comes up. So what I'm going to do is I want every field except the ID field. So the quick way to do it is just select everything, send them over, click on the ID field and send that back. And that's pretty much all of the fields that I want. Now, out of interest, there's the blog post that goes with this, which will also contain this database file if you want to have a play along, if you want to use it while you play along with it while you're looking at this video. Will be up here someplace. There'll be a link to it. Well, not so much a link, but there'll be a banner that tells you how to get it. It's going to be something like businessprogrammer.com/go/a number. I'm not sure what it is, but at the time you see the video, it will be there. So these are the fields. We click finish and they're automatically in. So video title is going to be kind of long, so I'm going to drag that out a bit. This particular video ID, not sure if I want that. I can just delete that. In fact, I'll leave it there because that's going to be the YouTube video ID. So yes, we're going to want that, and it's going to want to be a little bit bigger than that. Year, make it a little bit bigger. Month, not so much. Day, not so much. But make the video title adequately long. So what's going to happen is when I activate this form, both of these grids are going to display information, but it won't yet be a form subform relationship because both forms are acting independently. So if we make it visible, let's have a look. So you see I can move the years here, but nothing is happening within the grid. But you know, we've made progress. We've got two grids, but they are independent. They're not form subform relationships. Now it's time to make it a form subform relationship. So to do that, you got to go back to the form navigator and the data source video data, which you can see it's got the table control bound to it. And you know, I can rename that table control and give it a name like table video data. And when I click out of that particular name column, the control changes. And under DS years, if I expand that, I can give that, I can just all call this table years. When I click out, it adjusts. Now, the thing is, as I said before, what drives the data in these instances are these data sources. So to make this a form subform relationship, I need to drag data video data under data years. And when I do that, you will also notice that the properties will change. The properties of the video data source will have a link for parent and child fields, which is effectively the lookup link between both grids. So let's do that now. dragging it onto years. And there you go. So video data now is a sub-element of years. And if I click on DS video data and I go to data, you'll see link master field and link slave field. Well, what we want to do is link on the year. So when I change a year here, I want this grid here to be filtered by years. So I'm just recording this slightly out of sequence because I noticed a mistake myself. Let's just look at this. So regardless of what name you put on the label, of what this label is called, what you got to look to is the underlying data. So this particular, the year grid is feeding from the year via a query from the year column on the table. So the link master field is going to be year in this instance. The sub field on this grid is again going to be year. So we're linking on year. And so the important thing is, if you've got two separate tables, it's the field name on the tables you got to go by, or the field name in a query, and the query says year also. And I go to queries, query years, you see it says year. So if I called this years, or if I called it choose this, then the link master field would be choose this, but in this instance it's year. So if we go back to our grid, we're linking on year in both instances. So now let's see, do we have the form subform relationship? So I'm going to click on the protractor, and yes we do. So 2015, these are the videos, 2016, 2017, 2018. Now you'll notice that the wizard automatically put in numeric fields for month and day, but it's showing for November 11.00. So let's just quickly fix that right now. So I'm going to click back on the protractor here to go into design mode, and I'm going to click on month, and in our properties, which if they weren't coming up, you right click to get properties, I'm just going to go down to decimal accuracy and bring it down to 0, and on the day decimal accuracy again and bring that down to 0, and thousand separator is default at no, which is good. And let's click save, that's always a good thing. Let's click design mode, and yes, so we now have a form subform relationship. And remember, it's all down to the form navigator. You use the form navigator, and when you right click and say add new form, think data source. When you wish to open a form again, and especially in design view to edit it, you have to right click and choose edit. Unlike access, you can't go into the form and press the design toolbar. You right click and edit, and then we're back in design view. So I hope that helped, and if you found this video useful, consider liking and subscribing, and don't forget you can get the code that goes with this at the link that's been displayed earlier on in the video, or now maybe. Bye for now.